Here in this room you have looks like a dark room, a bit of drama. I want to talk about this series of images here by the American artist Adrian Piper, Food for the Spirit. It's a work of art that was done in 1971, but still extremely relevant. It's a self-portrait of the artist in the studio, photographing herself naked in front of a mirror. There is many ways to read, quote-unquote, read this series of images. Of course, if you can look at the history of painting, the notion of portraiture, of self-portrait, has filled up many pages of art history and many walls of museum. There's something peculiar here, is that you barely see the body of the artist. You barely see the portrait. And of course it's on purpose. Adrian Piper is an African-American artist. And what she's doing here is an exercise in visibility or invisibility. It reminds me in many ways a Ralph Ellison novel, The Invisible Man. The story of a man who is invisible, not because he doesn't exist, not because he's not physically present, but because the color of his skin makes him invisible to others in a society where skin color, skin tone, race makes people socially, physically, historically invisible. And this body of work by Adrian Piper, as you walk through it, as time seems to be passing through the photography, almost end up in absolute visibility. So with Adrian Piper, we were also talking beside the way images and the portrait was a statement about race and visibility, but it's also a statement about the notion of time. How can an image, or can a work of art can capture time? We had that also with the Giuliano Sarmento images and the kind of photographic film strip that are involved in the work The Prince of Hamburg. Here we have also a painting which is about the passage of time. It's a work of art by an artist named Anne Kawara. It's called Date Painting. In the mid-60s, Anne Kawara made the decision that he would almost exclusively make what he called date painting, which is painting on canvas the date of the day. We're talking also with Adrian Piper about how much the museum are filled with self-portrait. The walls of the museum are filled up with history painting, you know. Just think of Delacroix and the way Delacroix captured the history of his time through painting. Well, Anne Kawara does the same, but he doesn't do it like Delacroix or like David by representing an historical event or a historical figure on the horse. He does it by painting the date. So since, I believe, 1966, Anne Kawara does that. Every day, he paints the date. If the painting is not done by the end of the day, the painting doesn't exist. The painting always is using the language of the country where the painting is done. Why history painting? Because if you look at this painting, May 21st, 1987, well, this is history. Something happened. Actually, that would be very interesting to take an history book or just Google and trying to figure out an event that happened on that day. If you take the day of today, we are February 24th, 2022. History is changing at the border between Ukraine and Russia. So if Anne Kawara would be still alive, the date painting of February 2024, 2022 would contain in one line of text the history of an historical shift and historical change. Anne Kawara was also going a little bit further in this relationship to history, because all these dates painting were always would come with a box The painting would be contained in a box, and at the bottom of the box you would have the newspaper of the day. So with this work we have a box, we have the newspaper of May 21st, 1987. But there is also a paradox there, because the newspaper of May 21st, 1987 actually tell the news of May 20th, 1987. So even in this date, in this notion of history, how a date represents history, or the date painting, and the tension existing between the painting and the newspaper that Onkawara insert in the work, include in the work, there is a tension in time that suggests the timely space between the day he painted and the fact that this painting covers. So with Onkawara painting, the date painting, we're talking about the way time flows, or time is frozen in one object. Here, with this work by the Swiss artist Fischli and Weiss, we have also a frozen moment. Time has been frozen here. I need to be specific here to tell you where the work is. It would be easy to be confused and think that this is detritus of a construction site. You see two boards of plywood or drywall leaning on the wall, and a little bucket on the floor with rolls of tape and a little bottle of glue and a cutter. These three elements are the work of art. The fire extinguisher is just a fire extinguisher and not a work of art. This is one of the most conventional sculpture that we have in the Serralves collection. Why? Well, when the artist Fischli and Weiss will install an exhibition, when you install an exhibition, you always have, after a day of work, you have the leftover of a day of building walls, taping the walls for paint. So all of that are the detritus of labor, of building an exhibition space. And they would often ask the team working in the museum or in the gallery to give them these leftovers. And they would take them to the studio, and they would make, in styrofoam, hyper-realistic sculpture, copies of this object. So what you have here that looks like rubbish, that looks like this is leftover, that belongs to the trash, are actually hyper-realistic representation of objects, of tools that surround us every day and that we don't necessarily pay attention to them anymore. And they really play with this ambiguity that when you come and you visit the exhibition, you have the feeling that, well, someone just left the room, leaving behind him or her the tools of labor.